Our country is in the midst of a critical situation. We're in the middle of a pandemic that has claimed the lives of 100,000 people, and that number rises more every day. Every day, people suffer and die under a system that at its best fails to care, fails to ameliorate these problems, and at its worst, actively exacerbates them. George Floyd has been murdered by the police. Dozens of people of color have been murdered by the police, and police violence against the protesters who are springing up in support of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement in general is only increasing. You can find plenty of evidence all over the internet of misuse of police force. I know that this video is coming a little bit late into the narrative, but this has been a really difficult project to start working on for reasons that I'm going to get into, so I'm going to just go for it. I think that the current moment, these riots, is kind of a perfect storm, and I think it's been building for a while now. You could say for the entirety of this country's history. Now more than ever, as the globe warms, as fascism threatens to spring up all over the globe, as police violence increases, and as a pandemic continues to ravage populations and economies alike, even in places that were considered the most developed countries on the planet, I think it has become clear to everyone that the government and the systems we live under were not made for us. They were made for billionaires, rich people, white people, cis people, straight people. I don't want to go too broad about the issues at play here. Instead, I'm just going to focus on the riots and the protests. Specifically what people can do to kind of help the movement, even if they aren't able to actively participate in those public gatherings. Right now, the media is constructing a narrative in which only peaceful protest is permissible, and spinning both white supremacists and Antifa as somehow responsible for all of the violence, while the president sits back and tweets up a fucking storm about how a large and unspecified fucking group of the population is a terrorist organization now, with no definitions about where the group Antifa is supposed to begin and end, because for those who don't know, and I say this for the people in the back, it is not a contiguous, cohesive organization. It is just people. There's no hierarchy to it. There's no membership. It's not a club. Fuck's sake, dude, the news media in this country. Holy shit. The people who are protesting, and yes, the people who are rioting, are entirely justified right now. Riots and looting are not necessarily wanton acts of destruction. They are speech. They are a form of expression for groups of people who feel that they have no other avenue left to make themselves heard, who feel that they have no other way to communicate their pain and suffering and outrage. If people are rioting, it is the job of any responsible government and every responsible citizen not to condemn those rioters, but to investigate the underlying socioeconomic causes. If you want to stop the rioting, shooting the rioters does not help. Addressing the reasons for the rioting might. We cannot condemn the rioters. We must support them. We cannot condemn the protesters. We must empower them. What we must condemn, what we must resist, are white supremacy, racism, income inequality, and forms of discrimination and oppression everywhere. This video will by no means be comprehensively informative about the events that have taken place. There's not going to be a timeline or anything here. I'm not going to go over it news style, but I will leave a list later in the video of people who I think are doing a very good job of that. So by all means, you can go to them for information. What this video will be doing is largely focusing on my reaction to these events, in the hopes that some other people share that reaction, and, you know, figuring out what people who are in a similar situation to me can do to help. I live some distance outside of Madison, Wisconsin, with my parents for the pandemic, basically. I'm on lockdown here. And I live in a relatively well-to-do sort of suburbs area. So, like, you know, if I wasn't actively following up on this stuff, I would quite possibly have no idea it was happening, you know? none of what is happening in Minneapolis or all across the globe is happening here. It's happening in Madison 15 minutes away, and it feels like none of it has touched me here. I can look out the window and see, pristine lawns and fucking picket fences as far as the eye can see. There were protests in Madison a few times that escalated to the use of tear gas in the areas where friends of mine are living. These are events that I want to attend. This is a fight that I clearly feel like I should be part of. These are issues that I care deeply about and I'm very passionate about. Clearly. But my ability to participate in them is limited by my circumstances. I haven't had a real job in months because of the pandemic, so I don't have any extra money to donate. For those who don't know, I am a trans woman, so going to the protests by myself was not really an option. I felt like I wouldn't be the most physically safe doing it by myself, and I haven't had any, friends or people who I know who are doing it, which has kind of limited my ability to take part, physically, to be physically present at these things, which basically leaves me entirely insulated by virtue of my own privilege, just sitting at home looking out the windows at all these fucking perfectly well-kept lawns, all these fucking, upper middle class neighbors. That, to me, does not feel good. It feels disgusting. All the more so because my own self-disgust feels like such a fucking petty minor issue in the face of everything else that is going on right now. Police are shooting and arresting journalists who are trying to cover events, so who the fuck knows what they're doing to the protesters once the cameras are off them. There's a friend of mine who lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, who described hearing, sirens and helicopters, constantly for several days straight when all of this stuff was still fresh. And I don't know, I don't know to what extent the situation has changed. I don't know. That's exactly it. I feel so distant from all of this. The fucking National Guard is being employed. The police are doing what they do best, deploying unnecessary and excessive force against literally anyone and everyone. It's basically indiscriminate in places and at times. I mean, the more one hears about this, the more overwhelmed one becomes, really. So that's why I'm making this video. I'm making this video for people who are in the same situation as I am, or in a similar situation, where we care deeply about what's happening. We desperately want to be part of it, but for one reason or another, we're limited in our ability to participate. I'm going to put on screen, at the end of this video, a list of places where you can donate money if you have it, and by all means do that, but I recognize that we're in the midst of a terrible economic crisis, so, I wouldn't blame anyone who can't donate. I do not have the money for that myself right now. That's part of the point of this video. Donating is an easy action that can be effective, but we want to focus on alternatives for people who aren't necessarily able to participate that way. So here's what I have to say as someone in that situation myself. Firstly, I know it's difficult. It sucks a lot. There have been a lot of nights where I have not gotten a whole lot of sleep. I remember one of the first nights after this thing started, I was up for hours just scrolling through my Instagram feed on my phone, not even reading anything, not looking at anything, just kind of watching it go by. It's a surreal kind of mental space to be in. It feels sickening, disempowering. It is a reprehensibly impotent fucking feeling. And what I'm going to say is that we have to resist it. We cannot give in to the idea that our actions are futile. We cannot give in to the hopelessness, the powerlessness, the feeling that there's nothing we can do. Because that is how this system was built to keep everybody in line. We are more atomized right now than we have been in a while due to coronavirus and self-isolation, and that will only make those feelings of disempowerment worse. Right now, though, there are people who need us. Our teammates are out there calling for heals, and we're playing as the support class. So, first things first, take a step back, take care of yourself. Right? The most important thing is to keep yourself in a place where you can be productive, is to keep yourself in a place mentally where you are able to take action about this stuff and do things. Get some sleep if you can. that has helped me. Melatonin is how I do it, personally. Maybe that works for you. Just take a shower, listen to some music, do some self-care. You're no good to anybody if you're panicking, basically. And surround yourself with people who you know are on your side, who friends and people who can be supportive to you. And, if they're in a bad place and you're in a good one, then you can be supportive to them. Solidarity. That's how the whole thing works, You can cut a string, but you can't break a net, if that's not too cliche of a thing to say. That sounds like the end of a fucking Guardians of the Galaxy movie. But once you are in a place where you can do good, here's some ways to get started on that. Firstly, talk to people, particularly people who you know if they're in affected areas where protests and things are happening. Do a phone call with them, text them, Zoom with them. You don't necessarily have to talk about current events and the protests if that's too much for one or both of you to handle, but just keep in touch with them. See if they need anything. See if there's anything you can do emotional support-wise. Because again, that's what we're all here for right now. Sometimes a taste of normal life can help, Keep it banal, casual, soothing, comforting. Always comforting. But if you do discuss protests, and, if they're okay with you sharing details of the conversation and what's happening to them, then, record them if the other person is okay with that. Put it online. Put it on social media. Share this stuff as widely as fucking possible. We have to make sure that people's experiences get out there and are seen and are heard. Because the more of that we do, the less ability anybody with an interest in silencing us has to control the narrative. The more we do this, the more we get these statements out there, the harder it'll be for all of this stuff to get swept under the rug. The longer it'll be before it starts slipping out of the public consciousness after all of this is over, because it will be over eventually, and we have to make sure that it is not immediately forgotten. That's one of the things that worries me a lot. And, having these conversations with people and making sure that they continue to get shared is probably the most effective way to prevent that from happening. Don't let people forget this, and don't let people forget the crimes that the police are committing right now against the citizens of this country. Secondly, you can do a call to action. That is unashamedly what this video is. This is my direct action for the day. This is what I feel I can do. If you can make a video, totally go for it. It can be informative. It can list the ways that other people can help, like this. Put your own spin on it. Add your voice to the conversation. Again, same idea as before. We want to get everybody's voice out there as much as possible. Thirdly, and hopefully this one is obvious, participate in democracy. This one isn't necessarily a thing for today, but for tomorrow, for a few months down the line when the presidential election happens, and also at a fucking local level. Keep an eye on the elections that are happening down ballot. Be part of an organization that goes out and does this stuff. Join a local volunteer group or find one online, because the local elections don't have no power, they are just as crucial as the presidential, if not more so. So it is worth going after these down-ballot elections, and those tend to be spaces in which an individual's actions can have a much larger impact on the outcome. One person makes a lot more difference in an election of 5,000 people than 300 million. So if you care about changing this country for the better, if you care about preventing this from happening in the future, then getting involved with action is the best way to do that. Just overall, get the fuck out and vote. Absentee ballots. Don't get out and vote. Stay at home. Order absentee ballots. Now rather than later. The earlier you order them, the less chance there is that they will fuck with you like Wisconsin has fucked with all of us Wisconsinites. So stay at home and be safe. But vote. Vote is what I'm saying. Particularly in the fucking 2020 election, okay? In November when this happens, that's an entire other video. But seriously, at this point, if you don't like Trump, voting for Joe Biden is kind of the thing you should do. Voting is literally the least, most easy thing you can do to help with this stuff. If you are eligible to vote, but you don't, you are complicit in this kind of thing. If you are eligible to vote and you vote third party who has no chance of winning, or if you split the Democratic vote, then you are complicit in this thing. An alarming number of my fellow fucking lefty scum online are choosing not to vote and, or to vote third party, and that to me just sounds like such an entitled position to take. Here's my fucking protest vote so the DNC, will hear our voices and it can't do whatever it wants, and fucking, we'll split the Democratic vote and Trump will win and everybody will see that Biden was a mistake. It's like, do you really think that that's how they're gonna spin it? And meanwhile, for the next 4 years, people are gonna continue fucking suffering and dying, okay? This election is not the time to sit out on elections. This election is not the time for protest votes. We need to get Biden into office, and as far as I'm concerned, I have my own fucking problems with Biden, but the moment that he is in office, we can spend the next 4 years, his entire presidency, tearing him apart, just destroying his life, just picking apart every single stupid thing that he has ever done. But he has to get elected first. For the greater good at this point. People will continue to suffer and die. And that is not a sacrifice I'm willing to make just to fucking, stick it to the DNC. Not that that's even the thing they would take away from this. Seriously. Of all of Joe Biden's faults, one of, among them is not encouraging the National Guard and the police to open fire on fucking protesters. But, again, a whole other video. Whew. Sorry. Out of my system. It's out of my system. Fourthly, as cliched as it's gonna sound, educate yourself, particularly if you're a white person like me. If we want to be good allies, then the best thing that we can do is, listen to the people who have actually gone this. Listen to people of color, read things people of color have written, watch videos that they've made, all that good stuff. And platform it as well. If you're a white person who has a platform, use that to signal boost people of color and, people who are affected by this stuff but who don't have that platform. Because, again, getting their voices out there are so enormously important. I only have one book recommendation just, as a starting point. But this is Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. I just noticed this now, but one of the little quote things on the cover is Toni Morrison saying this is required reading. So, I guess if you don't take my word for it, fucking Toni Morrison. But this book is awesome. It's really impactful. It's really informative. It is a really, really good, crash course starting point on systemic racism in America. And it's just a really, really good perspective and a really, really good place to start. It also talks a good bit about how white people are sort of complicit in existing racist systems, which particularly as somebody who, wants to be supportive of BLM and all of that, is always invaluable. In terms of YouTube, there are a couple of people whose takes on this have been really informative and insightful, I think. Although they aren't people of color, but they do often signal boost people of color. So, again, it's a good starting point, but, don't let things end here. So, yeah, there's a popular streamer and YouTuber, Vosh, who has done a series of videos on this that I think have a lot of really insightful stuff to say about, rioting as action and how effective it can be and how we should think about it, how we should treat it, as well as a number of other things on this issue. There's several videos that he's done. Some More News has also done a couple of videos on this. They're also a really good channel overall with some really good takes. Thought Slime has done a video highlighting black content creators, so there's the signal boosting that I was talking about before. All of these are going to have links in the description and probably in a pinned comment as well, so feel free to go down there and see the links to these, watch these videos. Finally, and above all, stay safe. Enough people have died. Enough people are going to die as events continue to unfold. We don't need to add more names to that. So, that's my speech. Hopefully this can help you get involved and active. As promised, I'm going to keep going in voiceover here in a second, and I will put up a list of places you can donate and resources that you can go to if you're able. Again, Stay safe. Keep yourselves healthy. That includes mentally. Love y'all. I will continue saying things in voiceover while my stuff is on the screen. Yo, just inserting this now because it's been a while since I wrote this script and some stuff has changed. Minneapolis is talking about disbanding their police department now in favor of something else, which leaves me both excited and a little afraid. Excited because this is not something that would have happened before. Like, I wouldn't have imagined it was possible in America, like, at this point in time, were it not for the fact that it fucking happened. And I entirely agree with the sentiment. It does worry me a little, because the eyes of the world are going to be on Minneapolis right now to see how this goes, and, like, if one slip-up happens, whatever tiniest mishaps occur, everyone's going to hyper-focus on that. Like, the news media will eat that shit up, politicians, conservative pundits, everybody. Regardless of the fact that any transition between systems this broad and far-reaching is going to be rough. So I guess at this point I don't know what to say about it, other than that I sincerely hope that it all goes well. Also pretty recent news is the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone happening in Seattle, where protesters have secured an actual area of the city that's operating outside of police control. I mean, I don't think it's in too poor of taste to say that the results of the protests and the unrest are kind of exciting, you know? I think the optics of these experiments are going to be important, and while the Chaz and Minneapolis' disbanding the police may end badly, the fact that real people are warming up to these ideas gives me a lot of hope for real, radical, positive change. Obviously, we will have to wait and see what happens, but I think regardless of the short-term outcomes of these experiments, we still have reason to be excited. I don't think that these things themselves will last relatively long, necessarily. You know, one always hopes, but practically, I don't know. I'm optimistic about the sentiments behind them having a little more longevity, though. Like, I think these ideas are going to be more long-lasting. Sympathy to defunding the police is going to be more long-lasting, so I look forward to that. Lastly, as a personal announcement, I'm going to be making more content of this type in the future, so feel free to subscribe and click the bell if you want to see when that happens. I might do something else about the riots when things calm down, cover more of the events, more of an investigative piece with more cited sources and all that. I'll also be making content about other political issues. I've got a couple on TERFs in the works, and several about art forms of various kinds, including video games, just to give you a taste. So yeah. Given what this video was, it will also help promote it in the algorithms if you like and leave a comment. So if you agree with what I have to say, and you find the resources that I was trying to promote helpful, and you want them to reach more people, please do some engaging with it down there in the comment sections and the like button. Or you can dislike and call me a filthy communist if you want. That also helps, so, you know, feel free. Happy Pride Month, by the way. Black trans lives matter. Queer people of color are awesome. And Stonewall was a riot. See y'all. Take care of yourselves.